What's up, my know-it-alls? Happy New Year. Man, 2022. Here we are. Let's do this. So it turns out that the year 2022, coming in April, it's the 30th anniversary of Image Comics. So with the 30th anniversary of Image Comics closing in this April, I wanted to go back to the beginning of Image Comics publication history and maybe tell some of the stories from the early days of the great experiment that was Image Comics. Now, why am I going to do this? Well, I had an uncle. My uncle got me into Spider-Man comic books. Specifically, it was the Sinister Six. Now, my favorite artist at the time, and still close to my heart, is Erik Larson. Erik Larson went on to draw Savage Dragon in Image Comics, but my first introduction to him was Spider-Man. Moving forward, I began to read other comics, and eventually you get to Jim Lee and the X-Men, and you get to see a lot of the different iterations of all these different artists, and then all of a sudden one day those guys all disappear. Now I'm at the comic book shop trying to figure out what's going on, and I get introduced to Image Comics. April of 1992. The very first comic that I opened up with the Image Comics imprint was Youngblood #1. Now, if you're a comic book fan, you've clearly heard of Image Comics. Even if you didn't, live through the rise and fall of the comic book bust of the 90s and subsequent paradigm shift that occurred due to Image Comics. So that's what this is. That's what this is going to be. We're going to start at the beginning, and week to week, I'm going to make you as knowledgeable as I am, as I am, concerning this very niche and lost, if not legendary, even dare I say mythic, in some cases, point in comic book lore and history. And we're going to go do that by starting at the very beginning of it all. So there's more than a few videos about the actual beginnings of Image Comics and the creators, so we're not going to go too much into that, but we're going to start off right here at issue #1. First published in April of 1992 by an individual who is perhaps one of the most well-known for, well, at least at the time, one of the most high-profile individuals. I don't know how many of you saw the Nike TV commercial back in the day. Rob Liefeld, problematic or not, because obviously there's been a little drama concerning him in the past, but, you know, true to the Image Comics brand, when you delve into Youngblood #1, they were trying to do a lot of different things, and first and foremost, they were trying to change the way we saw comic books. So when you look at Youngblood #1, they did something interesting in that both sides featured a front cover. That's right. On one side was your front cover, and if you flipped it, the back side was a front cover. Both sides had a story. So we're going to go ahead and start at what is popularly known to be Side A. And the story is titled Youngblood Home Team. Now this story is really interesting. There's not a whole lot of deep storytelling, because you got to remember at this era, artists wanted to be their own creators and they wanted to write. Some were good at it, some were good idea people, but at the same time in this era, not everybody was tried, true, and tested. So this is what I consider to be a flashy book. There is no substance here. This is strictly both sides of the thing, by the way. The one side was called Youngblood Home Team. The other one was called Youngblood Away Team. And I think that was Rob Liefeld's attempt at trying to create sort of a Avengers, West Coast Avengers. He wanted his cake and he wanted to eat it too. And by that I mean, he wanted to be able to tell two different sets or styles of story. Could also be that he had a ton of characters and ultimately wanted to take the opportunity to split them apart because you couldn't really cram all of them into one. This story that we're going to start with, Youngblood Home Team, begins in Washington. There's a young man, spoilers, this is one of our main characters, his name is Shaft, and his girlfriend are walking in the mall, and you see a thief. He grabs a lady's handbag, problematic or not, because clearly the thief is represented as a black guy, which I'm like, all right, stereotypical, whatever. And somebody's voicing over, and by saying voiceover because there's captions, and the captions are telling a story, and essentially somebody's watching Shaft and has kind of set this whole thing up. They know he's going to be out with his girlfriend, he sees somebody doing a thing, and someone had hired an assassin to kill him, and so Shaft pretty awesomely has Shaft takes the opportunity to, he's like, I don't have an arrow. Someone's doing a thing. And he really quick just kind of whips out a pen and hurls it at this guy who he's barely caught a glance of. I think that in one of the previous panels there's supposed to be maybe like something that says, oh, sniper, but none of that. He throws a pen, hits the guy falls, clearly breaks his back in a well, not a well, forgive me, well, no, it is one of those wishing well type fountains, like you have in the shopping malls and whatnot. Anyway, the news crew's there, everybody suddenly descends, and they're like, what's going on? You know, this is happening, oh my gosh. The guy's like, SNN News, because they couldn't use CNN or whatever at the time. Youngblood was supposed to be a high-profile team. So then, of course, before the news can get too deep, down and dirty, and it's this. I laugh because I'm thinking about the art style. Rob Liefeld was known as not being able to draw feet very well, so he, whenever possible, hid things. But he also, his characters were always, I mean, if you look proportionately, they were like 15 feet tall, and for some reason always wore shiny, glossy jeans and pants. Women and guys alike had thick thighs, and I'm talking like thick. When I say thick, I mean, come on now, okay? But then his women had weird faces. Almost every woman had short hair because Rob Liefeld couldn't draw long hair. Now, he does draw long hair, but it's not good. And it almost always looks the same. And everyone who's got short hair has some variation on two hairstyles. Either the one we see Shaft with, as he's running away from his girlfriend, with her hair whipping in the wind. Or the kind you see later on a character named Vogue wearing in the B story. Anyway, this is essentially, this whole story for this half is really a roll call. That's really what it is. So a roll call is where every character is represented and are being summoned to the headquarters, to the mission, to the briefing, to the whatever. And you see them for a split second, either a panel, maybe two, doing something specifically for the purposes of letting you know two things. One, where they are, and two, this is about as much character development as you're going to get in this moment. So that's what a roll call is. So we see Shaft, he gets a beep. I'm assuming it's a page because we didn't have, cell phones weren't as prolific as they are today. He had a pager. Anyway, his girlfriend's all there. She's got her, like, you go get him tiger moment and whatnot with her weird face looking all elongated and stretched. Then we cut to, there's a farm in Baltimore somewhere, like in Maryland, in the countryside, rural, whatever part. And you meet Bad Rock. Yeah. Oh, yeah. The names were awesome in the 90s, man. Like, they knew what they were doing. And Bad Rock is a good old country boy, but he's a big boy with stone-like skin, and he gets a beat, and he's like, oh, I gotta go, Mom, and this and that. And then, and so we continue on, and you get to see another character. Die Hard is his name, because that's the kind of original names we had going on back then. And Die Hard is in what looks like some kind of a weird vault. It's a very Jack Kirby-esque looking, like, metal plate flat. It might be a bed. It might be medical something. What's funny is there's no perspective on this shot when you see him. And then, of course, Chapel, we get to meet him. He gets the call from headquarters. And, Chapel's he's a smooth operating brother who, by the way, in the last panel, you see Chapel sit up in bed because he's there with a lady, and lady friend, we'll call her. Funny enough, there's no difference between Chapel and Shaft other than their hair. And don't ask me why he named a white man Shaft. Also, the woman, this black woman, clearly does not, either she's got one heck of a weave. Okay, his girl's unbelievable, because in the next scene when he's got his gun out, she's like I said, he only can do so many hairstyles. But of course, Chapel's in his outfit now, his million pockets, literally looking like black cable. the little skull imprint on his face. Ooh, he was so big and bad. And then, of course, a big giant gun that is extremely unrealistic and probably can never be built ever anywhere. Briefly, you see Vogue, who apparently we're supposed to believe she doesn't care about anything because the caption's like, it's been 5 hours since I was paged. Okay, clearly we know you're a bad woman. We get it. We get it. You don't follow your own rules. I totally understand. So she's taken off somewhere, whatever. Anyway, so Shaft arrives at the headquarters. Eventually the team comes together. You get a nice classic team shot. And Rob Liefeld was a big fan of constantly these big... everything was a close-up, and it was either shocking or not or whatever. But, proportions changed as the need descended. But anyway, so the team is being sent after a group called The Four. Not a lot of original names going on here. The Four are your usual yahoos. You got your gun-toting guy. You got your big, strong guy who literally looks like he's cut right out of one of Rob Liefeld's Juggernaut pictures from back in the day. Oh, yeah, this guy's channeling Kane Marco like nobody's business. And then, of course, they free some other criminals. And these criminals are just the same. Everybody knows. Back in the 90s, characters knew how to do one thing, and that's pose. Okay? You talk about Yelena telling Black Widow, oh, you're such a poser, and you like to pose everything, this and that.
Why do you always do that thing? Do what? That thing you do when you're fighting. And this thing that you do when you whip your hair when you're fighting with the arm and the hair, and you do like a fighting pose. It's a fighting pose. You're a total poser.
I'm not a poser.
Okay, dude. That whole era came from the 90s, and this comic book is just bleeding it all over the place. So, anyways, suffice to say, as we get back to... So, literally, this whole thing is a setup for characters. You don't ever see them fight. There's an advertisement for Rob Liefeld's fan club. It's like, enclosed is $3.50 plus $1 shipping and handling, so a total of $4.50 to join the annual payment to be in Rob Liefeld. Talk about a guy who had his head so far up his own butt. I love Rob Liefeld, by the way. He created Deadpool. Created Cable, and a bunch of other characters. He's got Prophet that's coming out in a movie soon. Anyway, so now you go to the other side, the B side, what I'm calling the B side, which is the Youngblood away team. This is a different set of characters. It's Brahma, Riptide, Photon, Sci-Fire, Sentinel, and I think someone named, poorly named Cougar. Whatever. Because comics. This starts out with a guy named who they're calling Hassan Hussein. Again, 90s, and very problematic. And so this group, this away team, if you will, is being dropped in the Middle East to stop this warlord guy, and they've got all the usual stuff and so many the dialogue. Again, Rob Liefeld's not a writer. I'm sorry. You got characters like Cougar on one of the pages. He's like, I gotta admit, this gets me pumped, and he's all like, getting through, and everyone's doing all the same stuff. So, like, as in like the X-Men. So, for instance, you got big strong guy throwing the Wolverine-esque guy. You also have loose mentionings of the fact that some of these guys might be aliens, might be people from other worlds. They do make short order. They're fighting some people and whatnot. As you go through this whole thing, like I said, it's all one big setup. You do get these awesome Liefeld robots, but ultimately one of the characters finally narrows in on the bad guy. I want to say the guy's name was Sci-Fire. So Sci-Fire, he's sort of I'm assuming a telepath, telekinetic, whatever. And he narrows in on this Hassan Hussein guy, and as he's fries his brain. That's it. End of story. And so, some of the characters aren't happy. There's a whole page where they're like, oh, dude, it's so gross. I can't believe you did that. Again, nobody had done these kind of quirky things. It all feels very Family Guy right now. But, and then, of course, he got serious because the color palette gets dark and all you see is dude's eyes. And he's like, all right, that's it. Clean up crew. We're gone. And then, of course, it ends on this big, giant USA Today newspaper that's like, Hussein terror ends in suicide. And it's all very political. So there you go. Now you know, and if knowing is half the battle, then you're halfway to being the know-it-all that I know you can be. All right, we're going to go ahead and go on to the next month of Image's publication history because, unfortunately, at this time, they were just slowly doing one issue at a time. So the next issue we're going to look at is Spawn #1. That's right. In May of 1992, spawn number 1. So we'll check back next week or in a couple of days, rather, and we'll take a look at spawn number 1. So don't forget, like, subscribe, click the little notification bell to get more content when it drops. And man, I just look forward to seeing you guys again face to face as soon as I get cleared up of all this stuff. All right, check you later, my know-it-alls.